Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you about the wonderful books that I read recently, in particular the books that I read in December. So this is my December wrap up and I read some wonderful books this holiday season and I can't wait to tell you about them. So without further ado, let's start talking about the wonderful books that I read in December. The first book I read I actually told you guys about in my Best Books of 2022 video because I loved it so much, and that is The Toothpixie by Matt Haig. I love Matt Haig's Christmas series. I talk about it all the time. I even talked about it in my most recent video, which was my Christmas book haul, and if you watch my Best Books of 2022 video, I do read a little excerpt from this book and talk a little bit more about it, but this is in an installment of Matt Haig's Christmas series. And I love his Christmas series so much. I keep talking about it, so I won't ramble on about it for too long in this video as well. But I read this book for the first time this year in December, the beginning of December. I think this was my first Christmas book that I picked up, and I just fell head over heels in love with it. It's on the younger side of the middle grade genre or age bracket, and it has rhyme, it has beautiful illustrations by one of my favorite illustrators, Chris Mould, who also illustrates all of Matt Haig's Christmas books, and this is just a wonderful story about a pixie who can only tell the truth and the, I guess, trials and tribulations that come with that. I say this about all of middle grade and all children's literature, but it is perfect for any age, and it's just such a wonderful Christmassy series, obviously because it's a Christmas series surrounding Christmas, but it's just a wonderful book series and I highly recommend it. I keep talking about it because I love it very, very much. So I'm gonna move my stars and stack the books right here. The next book is a book that I read every December. I read it every year. I love it so much. I forget how many times I've read this book now, and that is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Carolyn Marie. And this is a book that's perfect for any time of year, but I really love reading it in the Christmas season because when this book first came out, I think in 2019, I was working at Barnes & Noble at the time. I just remember everybody was buying it for their loved ones for that Christmas, and so every year I read it around the Christmas season because it just reminds me of Christmas. It's a story about, as it says on the tin, a boy, a mole, a fox, and a horse. It's not meant to be a very linear story. Carolyn Marie even admits that in the introduction, but it's a beautiful book with fantastic quotes and just life lessons, and it's a wonderful way to be reminded through his stunning illustrations as well. He is not only a fantastic writer, but a wonderful artist and illustrator, and through his images and through these four characters, they tell us so much about humanity and life and friendship and love and just everything that a human really experiences. Every time I read it, it just gets better and better, and I love the books that when you read them at different stages of your life, they affect you in different ways. This book is one of those books where at every single different stage of your life, when you return to this, it'll hit you and impact you differently, and I think that that's so beautiful because the story itself doesn't change, but you change, and so the story's influence on you obviously changes as a result. So it is just gorgeous, and I highly recommend you pick it up if you haven't read it. Again, perfect for any age. Then the next book I read is actually a story in a book collection. So this is A Very Russian Christmas, the greatest Russian holiday stories of all time. I read two stories in this collection. The first one is The New Year's Tree by Mikhail Zoschenko, and I also read The Boys by Anton Chekhov. This edition is from New Vessel Press, New York, and it doesn't actually say who the translator is, and unfortunately, I really didn't love this translation, which is really one of the first times that that has happened because I love Russian literature. You guys know from my Russian Lit series. I haven't really come across a lot of translations that I just flat out don't enjoy, but this one I just felt like, it almost felt like they copy and pasted it into Google Translate, and pasted it into this book, it didn't really feel very natural. So I wouldn't recommend this edition, to be completely honest. It's a very nice collection, but the translation itself I just really didn't like very much, which is kind of unfortunate. The first story in this collection, The New Year's Tree by Mikhail Zoshenko, I did enjoy, but I think I was so caught up in my dislike of the translation that the story itself didn't really penetrate into my brain and my memory. I don't remember too much about it, even though I just read it very recently. So again, would not really recommend, unfortunately, this edition or this translation. Again, it doesn't even tell you which translation it is, so that makes me wonder how they actually translated the story. But a translation that I would recommend, and an edition that I would recommend that has quite a few Russian stories in it, is the Penguin Book of Christmas Stories, edited by Jessica Harrison. This is a fantastic collection from the Penguin Clothbound series, and this edition has a bunch of Christmas stories from different writers from different cultures and different time periods, and it always tells you, if it is translated into English, who it's translated by. So obviously this wasn't a Google Translate, copy-paste kind of situation, especially because it's coming from Penguin Random House. So one of my favorite stories in this edition, I didn't read it this year, but I read it last year. It's one of my favorites ever since I was little, and that is Hans Christian Andersen's The Fir Tree. So I love that one. And then Anton Chekhov's Boys is actually in this collection as well as Fyodor Dostoevsky's A Christmas Party and a Wedding, which is also in this collection, but I would recommend this edition more because the translation is better. I started reading Boys by Anton Chekhov in this edition, and I really wasn't liking it, and I thought, you know what, I know that it's in this edition, so I picked up this edition and I started reading it. This one, Boys by Anton Chekhov, is translated by Constance Garnett, who has translated so many amazing Russian stories, and she is a fantastic translator. So I did restart Boys by Anton Chekhov in this edition, and I loved the translation much more. Boys by Anton Chekhov isn't very Christmassy. There are elements of Christmas, there are elements of wintertime, but I wouldn't say it's a Christmas story, so just keep that in mind. So would highly recommend this edition. The next book I read, I also read every December and Christmas season, and that is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This story is just so absolutely fantastic. I feel like this is Dickens at his absolute best, because the thing that I struggle with Dickens, and I'm going to be talking about this in a little bit because I did also read Damians Son this month for the Dickens vs. Tolstoy book club. So the thing that I struggle with Dickens is how his books are very long, and he goes on a lot of different tangents, and he brings us in a lot of different places that aren't necessarily the core plot. And although that can be really fun and exciting and enjoyable if you're reading his longer works over a longer span of time, but because I always go into Charles Dickens books with the thought of, okay, I need to read this by a certain time because I'm reading it for a book club, it is harder for me to appreciate his meandering and not really feel like I just wish I was in the core story. Anyway, so A Christmas Carol, because it is one of his shortest works, I feel like he really honed in on what the core message had to be and really stuck to that. There is not really a lot of meandering. His wit and his witticisms and his humor and his heart and his sorrow and beauty and joy and just every emotion in this book, every aspect of humanity is in this book, and he is just a master at magical realism as well in this story, because obviously we have the spirits that are visiting Ebenezer Scrooge and how they impact his life and change his view on things, and it's one of the greatest character development stories in all of literature. Each character really feels like they have a purpose, which I feel like in other Dickens stories, sometimes the characters do feel like they're there just to fluff up the narrative, but this story really feels like everything, every word, every line, every sentence has a purpose, every character has a purpose, every message is told so beautifully, and everything is there for a reason, with so much purpose, with so much intention on Dickens's part. And that's something that I feel like, because he wrote in installments and episodically, and because he was paid by the word, so a lot of his stories were very, very long, it's not something that we get from him very often. But I think what I love about A Christmas Carol in particular is that we get that in this story. We get so much intention and purpose in A Christmas Carol, and the story itself is just so incredibly heartwarming, and I love it very much. If you haven't read it, it's a fantastic place to start with Dickens because, like I said a million times, I really do feel like this is Dickens at his very best. So would highly, highly recommend if you haven't picked up A Christmas Carol. And also there are so many wonderful adaptations. This is such an approachable story because it is so well known in just culture in general, Christmas culture. So yes, the next book I did talk about in my Christmas book haul as well, and that is a picture book called Where Snow Angels Go by Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell is known for her adult fiction. She wrote I Am, and also her incredible novel Hamnet, and this is her first picture book, and I love when I can see writers writing for all different genres, for all different age groups, and that is what she is doing now with her first picture book. This is the story of a young girl named Sylvie and how she makes a snow angel one winter season, and how this snow angel comes to life and acts as a guardian angel for her, and what the snow angel, I guess, does for her and what she does for the snow angel. And it's a gorgeously illustrated book. It's a little bit longer than a regular picture book, which I also love, because I love when you can take a traditional picture book and make it even more than what it really is. That's what I love about Kids Lit, is you can make it so much more than I think what the every person thinks of as a picture book. This is one of my very favorite illustrations. Love this book so much. I read it obviously for the first time this December, and I thought it was fantastic, and I can't wait to keep rereading it every year and every winter season. It's not really Christmassy, but it is a perfect book obviously for the winter time. The next book, I hope you guys are very proud of me for reading, because I did feature it in my 23 books I must read in 2023 video, and I read it and finished it before 2023, and I'm so proud of myself because I've been wanting to read this book for literally ages. I had to move my books because they were getting in the way, but that book is Heidi by Johanna Spyri. I love this book so much. Oh my gosh. So I grew up watching the Shirley Temple adaptation of Heidi. I had it on VHS. I remember having nightmares at night and begging my parents to put on the VHS of Heidi because that was always one of the stories that brought me so much comfort when I was younger, and I've always wanted to read the book and I just never picked it up until now. I finally read it and it is even more wonderful than I could have imagined. This book, it's a little bit, I just have to say, it's a little bit preachy, so take that with a grain of salt. Besides the slightly preachy morals behind this story, it is such a comforting, wonderful, beautifully described story. It is set on the Alps in Switzerland as well as in Frankfurt, Germany. The relationship that our main character has, Heidi, with her grandfather is one of the most heartwarming character relationships I have ever witnessed. It's about a little girl who is orphaned at a very, very young age. I believe she's 5 or 6, and she is taken to her grandfather's, and he has to take care of her. I don't want to give too much away, but he took himself out of society and lives on the mountains, and it's about how Heidi really helps him open up and kind of break down his walls and make him into this fantastic character, this fantastic father figure, and it is just such a heartwarming story. This also has fantastic friendship between our main character Heidi and another character Clara, which is the story that takes place in Frankfurt. I, again, don't want to give too much away, but Heidi's relationship with Clara as well, and also with a goat herd named Peter and his grandmother Granny. Just all the relationships in this book are so incredibly heartwarming. If I had to describe this book in one word, I think that word would be heartwarming, and I loved it. It's really perfect for any time of year. There's a wonderful quote on the back, so I will read it to you guys. Heidi looked around with glowing delight at the mountain peaks she knew so well, and which seemed to greet her like old friends. The descriptions in this book are just breathtaking, and I love it so much. So glad I finally read it. Very proud of myself because I set that as a goal for 2023 and I accomplished it in 2022. So pat myself on the back. Off to a good start. And then the last book is Damians Son by Charles Dickens. I'm not going to say too much about this book because I already talked about Charles Dickens and I guess the gripes I have with this book before, and we also had on my channel the last Dickens versus Tolstoy debate about Damians Son, as well as how much land does a man need and what men live by. I had it recently with Emma, our last debate, and now we're going full steam ahead with the Game of Tomes book club, and this was our last book for Dickens versus Tolstoy. So Emma and I did talk about this book in our debate, so I will link that down below, or you can find it on my channel under the live show, the lives section of my channel. Anyway, Damians Son, I really loved the core story. I really liked the characters. I just felt like it is quite a hefty book. It's about more than 900 pages. And I just feel like it could have been condensed quite a lot. Just trying to read it by a certain date, I think, is not the best way to read Dickens's longer works. I think you should really give Dickens a lot of your time and maybe break it up, read one chapter every day. And for me, I had quite a lot going on in December, and so when I was reading this book, I was trying to read a lot of it in a shorter span of time so I could finish it by our live show date. So I do admit that, and I say take my opinion with a grain of salt because obviously that's just my opinion, and I would recommend this story. I really would recommend you give it a read. It is a wonderful story, and it's really Dickens kind of getting into what he does so well, especially in his later works. I haven't really been loving early Dickens, and I feel like with Damians Son was really one of the first books that I thought, yes, I can see what I love about Dickens's later works in this story, and I feel like he's really becoming the writer that I love in this story, and then eventually, obviously, with every book that he writes from here on out, he gets better and better. So would I recommend this book to you? Yes, absolutely. I just would also recommend you maybe read it over a longer period of time. So that's what I have to say about Damians Son. So these are all the books that I had to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed. I would love to know what book was your favorite that you read in December, or maybe a book that you think everyone should read in December. I'm always looking for more December, wintry, Christmas recommendations, so I would love that very much. Obviously, I recommend all of these, or at least most of them. Sorry, I feel so bad for this edition of those Russian stories, but I really didn't like that translation. Anyway, I hope your January is going very, very well, and I send you my warmest wishes. So thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon in another video with some more books. I can't wait for my January reading. I'm reading some amazing books currently, and I can't wait to tell you about them soon. So anyway, I will see you soon in another video. Happy reading.